Good evening. It is now 6:30 p.m., a little past, maybe 6:34, on Monday, June 22nd, and I now call the Winton Woods City School Board of Education to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
and to the republic
one nation, under God,
one nation,
indivisible, with
indivisible,
and justice
for all.
Thank you. Mr. Seymour, would you please call the roll? Mr. Seymour, Mr. Smith, your computer.
Oh,
there you go.
Oh, Dr. Cupoletti?
Present.
Mr. McGowan's?
Present.
Mrs. Douglas?
Present.
Mr. Birdie?
Present.
Dr. Johnson?
Present. Thank you, Mr. Seymour. As you can see, our meeting this evening is still being conducted via Zoom online meeting platform, and the Waycross Media is on site with Mr. Superintendent Smith and Mr. Seymour at their location. There's not a need for agenda item 2.0, which is a recess. So again, keep in mind that it is our intention to be as thorough as possible in these board proceedings. However, we will forego any public comments at this time, which is agenda item 3.0. Please direct your attention to board policy number 016901 regarding the public participation in board meetings. Having said that, we'll now move to agenda item 4.01, which are comments from the Winton Woods Teachers Association. And I believe, do we have the representative from the Winton Woods Teachers Association on the line? Okay, we do not. Okay, so we're going to move on then with agenda item 4.02, which is the Ohio Association of Public School Employees. And I do believe we have a representative from the OPSE tonight. Mrs. Ferguson Gordon, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Good evening, Madam Vice President, Superintendent Smith. Thank you for acknowledging your OC, and thank you for having this meeting virtual. I do appreciate it and keeping us all safe. Have a good evening.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you for being present today with us in our meeting. The next item on our agenda is 5.01, which is the approval of minutes as presented. Board, unless you see any necessary changes to these minutes, a motion would be in order at this time.
Madam President, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
It's been motioned. Did I get a second?
Second.
I'll second it.
Okay. Thank you. It's been motioned and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion regarding the minutes? Seeing none, Mr. Seymour, would you please call the vote? You have to unmute.
Dr. Cupoletti?
Aye.
Mr. McGowan?
Aye.
Mrs. Douglas?
Aye.
Mr. Birdie?
Aye.
Dr. Johnson?
Aye. That vote passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is 6.01, which is the treasurer's report for the financial statement for May 2020. Mr. Seymour, you have the floor.
Yes, for the month ended May 31st, total year-to-date revenues in the general fund were $48.4 million, which represents most of the revenue we'll receive for the year. And as you know, we were reduced by $551,000 from the state. So our month-to-date revenues were only $2.2 million as a result of that reduction. Our expenditures year-to-date in the general fund through May were $47.4 million. However, we are currently running approximately $4.5 million under our projected budget. Our year-to-date activity for all funds, we have 58 million, 19 million currently in the general fund, 5.3 million in our building fund, and 28 million in classroom facilities. As you can see, our funds for building and classroom facilities are reducing as the buildings progress. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Okay, I only have one question, Mr. Seymour. Does the reduction of the $551,000, does that affect our 5-year forecast? And if so, how?
It'll be reflected in your next forecast. As you know, you had to adopt one. We adopted one at the last board meeting where I took and reduced the 551,000. And also we did our estimated best estimates for our reductions for the next 2 years. And if you've checked your email, I might as well mention right now, the State Ohio Department of Education sent Mr. Smith, myself, and Dr. Johnson a letter today stating that our 5-year forecast is being monitored by the Ohio Department of Education because it goes into deficit spending in the year 2022. So as you know, currently the forecast has many factors in it that were previously negotiated for personnel, which I didn't have authority at the time to revise. There may be things to revise in those personnel schedules for our next 5-year forecast. And also Mr. Smith is making reductions to the budget, which we would not have known at the time of passing that. We just had to make our best 5-year forecast we could with the information we had at the last meeting. Does that help?
Okay. All right. Does anybody else have any other questions for Mr. Seymour? Okay, with no objections being heard, let the financial statements for the month of May 2020 be submitted for audit. And the next item on our agenda is 7.01, which is the treasurer's recommendation of the investments for May 2020. Mr. Seymour, back to you.
Yes, we had $58 million invested during the month of May, and we earned $49,000 in interest. General fund, $17,000, and our building fund, $32,000 for the month of May.
Thank you, Mr. Seymour. Board, a motion is in order.
I'll make a motion to approve the investment report as presented.
Second,
Who seconded that?
Cupoletti.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it's been motioned and second. Are there any questions for discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Seymour, would you please call that vote?
Dr. Cupoletti,
Aye.
Mr. McGowans,
Aye.
Mrs. Ruggless,
Aye.
Mr. Birdie,
Aye.
Dr. Johnson.
Aye. That vote passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is 7.02, which is the financial appropriations, the resolution for the fiscal year 2020. Mr. Seymour, you have the floor.
What you have before you is the final appropriations resolution for the current fiscal year. No appropriations or budgeted items were changed for any of our tax funds, meaning our building fund, our general fund, permanent improvement, all of our taxable that receive real estate taxes. The funds that would have changed would have been state and federal grants due to the timing of the spending and the revenue collected on them. As you know, grants run a fiscal year of September to September, and we run a fiscal year of June to June. So at the end of our fiscal year, I have to adjust for those grants. So what I'm asking you to do is approve the final appropriations for the current fiscal year. And also a copy of the amended certificate is attached with which I have to file with the county auditor, showing that sufficient revenues were collected to cover those appropriations.
Thank you, Mr. Seymour. Board, a motion would be in order.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the final appropriations for fiscal year 2019 2020 as presented.
Second.
Thank you. It's been motioned and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Seymour, would you please call that vote?
Dr. Cupoletti,
Aye.
Mr. McGowan,
Aye.
Ms. Ruggless,
Aye.
Mr. Birdie,
Aye.
Dr. Johnson.
Aye. That vote passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is 7.03, which is the temporary appropriations resolution for fiscal year 2021. Mr. Seymour, back to you.
Yes, I'm asking for the board's permission for a temporary appropriations resolution until we get the final one done. Usually, we present that new 5-year forecast and those final appropriations at our regular August meeting. But however, I need a permission from the Board of Education. Yes? I need permission from the Board of Education in order to start spending to make payroll and to make those necessary expenditures until we get those final appropriations and budgets ready for your review.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Seymour. Board, a motion will be in order.
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution determining to proceed to levy an additional tax for the current, no, wrong one?
No,
Yeah.
7.03, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Temporary
I'm so,
That's okay.
I make a motion to approve the temporary appropriations resolution for fiscal year 21 as presented.
I'll
I'll
second
second.
that.
It's been motioned and seconded. Are there any questions for Mr. Seymour or discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Seymour, would you please call that vote?
Dr. Cupoletti,
Aye.
Mr. McGowan's,
Aye.
Mrs. Ruggless,
Aye.
Dr. Birdie.
You promoted me, Dr.
Oh,
Birdie.
Mr. Birdie. Okay, that's better than Mrs. Mr. Birdie,
Aye.
Dr. Johnson.
Aye. That vote passes unanimously as well.
A little humor for the evening.
So you gotta keep it light. All right, the next item on the agenda is 7.04, which is the resolution to proceed to levy an additional tax for current operation expenses. Mr. Seymour, if you would explain that to us as well.
Sure. As you know, before you passed a resolution of necessity that was forwarded to the Hamilton County Auditor's Office. Now the county auditor is sending back and certifying to you that the 6.95 mils requested will generate approximately 3.2 million and cost the owner of a $100,000 home $243.25 annually. This is a resolution to proceed, and it contains the ballot language, which will be on the November ballot for 6.95 mils of additional funding.
Thank you, Mr. Seymour. Board, motion would be in order.
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution determining to proceed to the levy an additional tax for current operating expenses in excess of the 10 mil limitation as presented. The Hamilton County Auditor has certified that the levy will generate $3,194,034 annually, and it will cost the owner of a $100,000 home $243.25 annually.
I'll second.
It's been motioned and seconded. Are there any questions for discussion?
No questions, but just a quick comment. I think
Okay.
Mr. Seymour's message that the ODE is going to be looking at the 5-year forecast kind of highlights the need that as to why we're going to the ballot with the levy.
Thank you, Mr. Birdie. The other thing that we might want to keep in mind too is as we move into our new buildings, we're looking at making some changes with the preschool, with security, with busing, and that those are all operating expenses that we need to kind of keep in mind that will need to be supported, that haven't been supported to this point. So that's the other thing that we want to probably impress upon the voters and the constituent as we move forward.
Dr. Johnson and board, also, as we look at the cuts that we've already sustained from the state, and we really don't have an idea of what cuts might be coming down the line. This COVID-19 pandemic, we certainly have to find ways to make sure that we're supporting students. A lot of students, online learning, sometimes we really need to make sure that we're not losing any students falling between the cracks, and have the financial support to give the students the additional services that they need. And I think it's really going to be interesting in the next year to understand what's happening at the states, and then also being mindful and strategic and making sure that we are doing what we can do to make sure that we are keeping our children the main thing. We're in the business of educating children, and we have to make sure that that is key. So therefore, looking at the levy support, it would be great to be able to undergird support for our students, and making sure that we don't lose them in a learning gap loss because of COVID.
Right. Thank you, Mrs. Ruggless. Anyone else? With nothing more, Mr. Seymour, would you please call that vote?
Sure. Dr. Cupoletti,
Aye.
Mr. McGowan,
Aye.
Mrs. Douglas,
Aye.
Mr. Birdie,
Aye.
Dr. Johnson.
Aye. That vote passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is, thank you, Mr. Seymour. The next item on the agenda is 8.01, which is the reports of the superintendent, which is the certification of standard governing types of food and beverages sold on school premises. Mr. Smith, you have the floor.
Yes, Madam President and Board. Every year, the state determines, based on Ohio Revised Code 3313.814, if we are meeting the nutrition guidelines of food sold on school premises during the school day. I'm happy to announce that we're pleased to report that the Child Nutrition Department has continued to meet these guidelines and requirements this year. And also our a la carte items are also in alignment with the state standards. And so in retrospect, what happens with the building principles of what's being offered in vending machines, school stores, fundraisers, and their respective buildings, the principals have done a very good job monitoring the food, so we can report that our schools are also in compliance with applicable requirements. So all of our food requirements on campuses meet all of the safety and standard guidelines governing foods and types of beverages sold on school premises.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Board, this is informational. It's an update. We don't need to vote on it, but it is informational. And I would just like to take some time right here to commend Mr. Doctor and the food service staff and the child nutrition staff for all that they have done to serve nutritious meals to our students in the district during the time that school was closed, and how it was organized and to get the food out, and how they just continue to do such a wonderful job, even with the top scholars meals. And so that's it doesn't go unnoticed, and we just want them to know that we appreciate the work that they're doing behind the scenes, because sometimes you could take that kind of stuff for granted, but you shouldn't. And so we appreciate what they've done, and you bringing this to our attention, Mr. Smith, at this time. Would anybody else like to have a comment at this time? Okay, let's move on to agenda item 8.02, which is the facilities update. And Mr. Smith usually turns it over to Mr. Denny, who is our Executive Director of Business Affairs. So you all have the floor at this time.
Mr. Denny, are you ready?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Good evening,
Right.
board.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Appreciate the opportunity to give an update. I'm pleased to report that progress continues to be made on schedule. We're on time and we're still on budget, which is a great thing. Just as a reminder to anyone that tunes in to these meetings to view them, you can see updates every week, actually. So if you just go to www.wintonwoods.org, that's our district's homepage, and you scroll to the bottom left-hand corner, you can click on construction updates and you'll see a publication that the district places there. We work with our construction management firm, Skanska Megan Construction, to produce this update every week. So if you're interested in that, you can always stay up to date on what's happening with the buildings by going there. And we had a very busy month. Historically, June and July and August are big months in construction. A lot of that tends to be because the rain cooperates. So we've been able to make a lot of progress. There are quite a few trades on site now, and there's a lot of progress being made. So a lot of electrical work, glazing or glass going in, a lot of wiring actually for technology. So they're pulling Cat 6E cabling, and it's miles and miles of it. But it's looking good. It's coming along, and we're very pleased with the progress. Happy to answer any questions Mr. Smith might have or the board might have at this time.
Or before you comment, I'd just like to say, I think Mr. Denny makes a good point. I know he gives us updates every month and periodically during the work session, but he wanted to just stress that these things are happening every week. I know the public only gets a view every month, so he gives you a comprehensive view about what's happening, and he tries to kind of capture all the important parts to make it a very full report. But just to let you know that there are things happening in these buildings every single day, not just once a month.
Thank you, Mr. Smith and Mr. Denny. Board, are there any questions that you might have for either Mr. Smith or Mr. Denny with regards to the facilities update?
I don't have any questions, but I have to say, when sometimes when I go down the road or just happen to be in Green Hills, the buildings are very impressive, but it really makes me feel good to know that they're on time and they're on budget. That feels good. So, just looking at the progress, the community should be very proud of how these buildings are going up and the care that we've taken not to infringe on the community as much as possible. So kudos to everybody that's involved in managing that situation. I can't wait to get a glimpse.
I just want to add that the board appreciates receiving the information as well. And just to remind us that that's where you can find the updates. That's always nice to know. Board, in our email, forget what day it came out, but there was an invite for a facilities tour. Mr. Denny, if you want to talk a little bit more about that, it was an invite. I'm pretty sure it was to replace the tour that was missed on March the 18th, if I'm not mistaken. And it is a walkthrough. At this point, I'm not sure whether you guys are planning any type of virtual or where someone will be Zooming and being able to film it at this point. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Dr. Johnson, before Mr. Denny comes in, Mr. Denny has been working diligently to prepare both. So he has a virtual opportunity as well as a live opportunity. We didn't know what the effects of COVID would be. We didn't know how long it was going to last. So he was diligent about preparing both, which that's what we have to do for everything that we do now. We have to prepare several different scenarios just in case something goes out of whack.
Okay, well, that's good to know.
More about that?
Yes,
I think you nailed it, Mr. Smith. And this is our new normal. And so we have to assess the conditions on the ground at all times, really, and be prepared. So, and you're right, Dr. Johnson, this is an opportunity to replace the lost opportunity that the board experienced back in, I believe it was March.
yeah, I think it was March the 18th we were supposed to go, yeah.
And so it was unfortunate, but it's delayed, and hopefully something we can set up, and it'll be a good experience for you to get an inside view at what's happening inside these projects that are so important to our community and our schools.
Yeah, we learned a very valuable lesson. I believe the building was Forest View, Mr. Denny, that was demolished. And we did not want the board to see it from the outside in or see a video or have a remote opportunity. And once you guys had a chance to tour the facility, you knew that the recommendation from the business manager was the right one, saying the building is actually costing us more to stand up than it would be to demolish. So it's always very important for us to let the board see the actions and activities, because you'll have questions from people in the community. And I wanted you guys to make sure you have facts about why we do what we do in light of what people think we're doing. So having you with a real view of what happens in the buildings is more important than you can imagine, especially when you can actually say, I've seen it myself and this is what it looks like.
Thank you, Mr. Smith and Mr. Denny, and for also rescheduling that tour and being open to the fact that, you know, even if there are those that want to take an opportunity to walk through, that we still might need to do a something virtual. That I believe was scheduled for 5 to start at 5 at the middle school on Farragon. Am I correct about that? Where it was going to start at 5 on July the 18th. That's what it's scheduled for right now.
I believe that's accurate. I will double check that.
Okay. I was just kind of letting the board know. It is on the night that we should have our work session. So our work session normally doesn't start till 6:30. That is scheduled for 5. We'll kind of see how it goes. That's, you know, kind of the best we can do. Okay. And if it's an invite, it's not mandatory, it's not required, but it's an invite. So if you can make it, great. If not, then hopefully we will be able to do some sort of virtual something that will, you know, let everyone participate. Okay.
What's the
Dr.
date?
Johnson.
What's the date again, Dr. Johnson?
It's July the 18th. And it's at 5. It's on our regular work session day, I believe. No.
It's a Friday?
No. It's a Monday, isn't it?
Yeah, July 18th looks like is a Friday, is a Saturday.
I don't know why I thought it was the 13th.
Oh, is it the 13th?
Now that's a Monday. That's a Monday.
Okay. I've got it
the
written here
13th.
wrong. Okay, I'm sorry, guys. Thank you for
Yeah,
correcting.
I'm pretty sure it's the 13th.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I got the wrong date. It's July. I know it's our work session day, so it's
Right,
on a Monday. And I think that originally we had talked about it and we said kind of make it on the same day. That way we would kind of double up on our time so that we're not having to come together twice in 1 week or whatever. But again, if it's too much, if you just want to join in, you know, like through video, then they'll hopefully have that opportunity set up for us as well.
And
Dr.
Dr.
Johnson.
Johnson. Oh, go ahead, Mr. Smith.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Ms. Ruggles. The work session is still scheduled for that day.
Yes, at
Again,
6:30.
we wanted to maximize the opportunity for the board and not to have so many visits, not do so many remote meetings. So this was a way to condense it. We were hoping that we could have done it in person, but if we can't, then the remote opportunity is available.
Yes.
And I was just going to add, just in case someone tuned in just now, that this is just the board. This is not an open invitation as of yet. And Mr. Denny is working on different virtual options for others. But this is a board event.
Very good point, Ms. Ruggles.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Ruggles.
Madam President.
Yes.
Looking at the schedule where we arrive at the 7 through 12 building at 6 p.m. and start the tour after putting on PPE and then being ready for our 6:30 work session seems problematic to me.
I think it'll probably, and Mr. Denny or Mr. Smith, you can help us answer this, but I think it will probably be very similar to what we did when we did the tour of the facility that at Forest View. And we went over there, then we came back. So I would say then our meeting is scheduled to start at 6:30. If it started at 6:45, we would still, it is the expectation that whatever time we finish with the tour, then we would start our work session. I mean, I'm just making that assumption, but Mr. Smith and Mr. Denny?
Dr. Johnson, I think that given what Dr. Cupoletti mentioned about the PPE and making sure we started the meeting promptly at 6:30, because that's on our calendar, and that's what's in our event. I'm sure that Mr. Denny would be able to contact Skanska or SHP and try to get the tour earlier so that we could be on schedule for our work session.
And then there's still the question of whether we're going to have an in-person meeting or a virtual meeting.
The board has not decided on either, but from my understanding, it was still virtual until the president or vice president made the recommendation, and that's not been on the table at this point, I don't think.
Okay, thank you.
So far, Dr. Cupoletti, we are kind of keeping our ears open to what's coming down. I don't know if you've seen the latest news, but in Hamilton County, our zip code 45240 was the highest number. So having said that, I don't think we want to rush into, gather. I mean, I'm just saying there were 3 zip codes, 45240, 236 and 231, I think it was, that were listed. So keeping that in mind, I think that we want to be as proactive and less reactive. And proactive would be for everyone to stay in their homes. And that's why I said if there's an opportunity to do some sort of video, we could just log into our computers at 5, watch the walkthrough. This construction people are already walking through, the buildings. So they could walk through with someone, we could watch it. And it's possible that the tour wouldn't, for the middle school or on Farragut, wouldn't take a full hour. I mean, maybe it's from 5 until say 5:30, 5:45, something. And then they get to the high school and it starts immediately, and whatever time that's over, then we move right into our work session. So, but again, we're gonna keep our ears open and use our best judgment in when we will come back together and have a live meeting, and keeping in mind, everyone's safety. So that, I think that's probably, like Mr. Denny said, that's probably the best we can do for right now, and every day we're listening for some better news that it's going to flatline, but so far that's not been our experience,
And Dr. Johnson, Mr. Dr. Cupoletti, this thing is really evolving. If you recall the last meeting work session we had, I mentioned, at some point the board is going to need to have a discussion about when are we going to go back into in-person meetings. But since then, 50% of the districts of the communities that are part of our district have been identified as the highest number of COVID cases. So I agree with Dr. Johnson wholeheartedly that we have to allow the numbers to continue to guide how it is that we traverse through, in-person meetings, anything as it relates to person contact. So, I mean, it took me by surprise because I had conversations with some of our fire personnel and our first responders, and it's, no, we don't think that we're going to have an issue. And 2 weeks later,
Mhm.
45231
Right.
was off the charts.
Right.
So I think we have to be diligent and mindful of safety for everyone first.
Thank you. I agree.
Okay.
Dr.
All right.
Johnson, I
Yes,
have
sir.
one comment,
Yes,
and
sir.
I think that this whole process of COVID is something that we need to take time to discuss so that people can have a clear understanding of what it is we're dealing with. And I saw the zip code information. I believe I forwarded to you earlier
Yes.
last, so that you would know exactly what we're trying to flush out. But one of the things that I wanted to know, based on the report, and did anybody read the report, the entire report? Was it based on how many people who had tested positive for COVID? Was it based on how many people were hospitalized? Was it based on how many people were in intensive situations on ventilators? Was it based on what? What was it based on? The spike says these are reported cases, but how are the cases affecting the outcomes of how the people in the community are able to move about their community safely? That's my.
The governor has said that everyone in those 3 zip codes needs to be tested for COVID. Looking at the websites, there is a huge spike in Hamilton County going up in terms of deaths and hospitalizations. So I think we just need to keep an eye on it.
Yes, sir. Dr. Kuplety, can you go back again? You mentioned deaths, and then you mentioned hospitalizations.
Yes, so the deaths have gone down, but they went down, and now the hospitalizations have gone up, and so we would expect that in a week or two the deaths will go up.
Okay. Well, I think that, like Mrs. Ruggles said, we're going to just keep I didn't know the news that you just said, Dr. Kuperleti, that everyone in those zip codes should be tested. I read the article that Mr. Smith sent me, and I did a little more digging, and I just, what I had seen was that more people were being tested, and there were more positive cases.
I did
know.
hear that, Dr. Johnson.
Yeah.
Anyone in those zip codes should be tested.
That's interesting. I know that I was online with a group on Sunday, and when we first started our meetings, no one knew anybody who had been tested positive. And out of the, say, 45 of us that were online, I think at least half of us then had someone in our family or something that had been tested positive. And some of us had actually had people who have passed away from it. So I think that, we just have to keep our ears open and move cautiously at this time. So
Yeah, and Dr. Johnson, I appreciate the board, the support that the board gave my office, as well as the principal of the high school and his team, where I know people wanted us to have a traditional graduation, and we did not. We had a virtual one. I'm not sure what that would have done in the area of spikes. The 2 largest things that happen, and one doesn't actually happen in Forest Park, it actually happens in the city at Xavier, but the 2 biggest events that happen for this community, well, actually 3, would be the Night of Freedom. That happens in the city. It would be our graduation at the Centos Center, and then the Jazz in the Park. Those are the 3 largest events. If we would have actually had the event in our high school like people wanted us to, I'm not sure what the spikes would look like, or if it was a change, I don't know. But I'm happy that the board was supporting those ideas and those suggestions because I wanted to make sure that all the kids and the staff were safe.
Yes. I agree. I appreciate the leadership. Sometimes making the right decision is not always easy because everybody doesn't agree with you, but it's still the right decision. So, and that's just the way it is. So, but we will keep our ears open and how that whole thing progresses. So let's move on to the next item on the agenda, which is 9.01. And it's under the superintendent's recommendations for personnel schedules. And I do believe that we need to move into executive session. Do you want to do it now or you want to do it at the end? Mr. Smith, it's your call.
Okay, I think that Mrs. Ruggles is ready to for the executive session now before personnel schedules are reviewed.
Okay.
Yes. Madam President, I'd like to make a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of negotiations.
It's been motioned. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been motioned and seconded. Mr. Seymour,
Dr. Cupoletti,
Aye.
Mr. McGowan's,
Aye.
Mrs. Ruggles,
Aye.
Mr. Birdie,
Aye.
Dr. Johnson.
aye. The executive session vote passes unanimously. It is now 7:16. Is that what everybody has on their clock? We're going to move into executive session. Mrs. Hobbs, you have the floor to move us into a private session. And when we are finished, we will come back out into our regular meeting and resume. Well, Mr. Seymour, are you ready? You all are on mute.
Dr. Cupoletti,
He's on mute. You're on mute. Can you
Present.
start over, Mr. Seymour, for the record and call the roll?
sure. Dr. Cupoletti,
Present.
Mr. McGowan's,
Present.
Mrs. Ruggles,
Present.
Mr. Birdie,
Present.
Dr. Johnson.
Present. Thank you, Mr. Seymour. We're officially back in our regular board meeting, and we were on agenda item 9.01, personnel schedules. Mr. Smith, would you like to add anything other than what we already discussed about the personnel schedules?
No, Madam President, the board will receive the updated schedules at the next regular scheduled meeting with the salaries indicated for your review. I'm going to go through now and just give you what the rec to approve the personnel schedules as presented. Schedule A, resignation. Schedule B, personnel employment certificated staff. Schedule C, personnel support staff. Schedule D, personnel certificated and uncertificated. And finally, Schedule E, leaves.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. Board, a motion would be in order.
I'll make a motion to approve the personnel schedules as presented.
I second.
It's been motioned and seconded. Are there any questions or discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Seymour, would you please call that vote?
Dr. Cupoletti,
Aye.
Mr. McGowan,
Aye.
Mrs. Ruggles,
Aye.
Mr. Birdie,
Aye.
Dr. Johnson.
Aye. That vote passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is 9.02, which is the proposal for an overnight extended student trip for the Winton Woods High School Varsity Ensemble to Carnegie Hall in New York, for next year, February the 11th through the 15th, 2021. Mr. Smith, you have the floor.
Yes, Madam President and Board. As you know, the trip was canceled last year due to COVID-19 issues. We were fortunate that none of our kids were, contacted the virus when they attempted to travel to New York. We have actually refunded the money to all seniors that were graduates in the class 2020. So the music department, along with the members of Carnegie Hall, wanted to attempt to have this experience again. It's not scheduled until February 11th of 2021. We would definitely know far in advance if this is a possibility, but we wanted it to be at least a consideration for the board because the young people have worked very, very hard to get to Carnegie Hall, which is a once in a lifetime thing. There was some mention that we would actually bring the seniors back, the graduating seniors. However, we are opposed to that simply because we would not know how to control the circumstances, meaning they would be young people on their own, leaving college, the world of work, the military, and it's very difficult to supervise a group like that. And I'm not saying that they would be mischievous or create a storm, but one incident would actually not be favorable for us. So they understood it, they received their refunds back, and now the choir director is working to teach other kids those parts just to see how it could possibly happen. Again, this is a lofty goal simply because it happens in February, but we would know sooner than later, which we would probably want to take it off the table. But this is just for consideration. If the board had an appetite that says, if things are good, things are a go, then February 11th through the 15th would be a possibility.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Board, a motion would be in order.
I'll make a motion to approve the proposal for overnight extended student trip, Winton Woods High School Varsity Ensemble at New York, New York, February 11th through the 15th, 2020, as presented.
I second.
It's been motioned and seconded. Are there any questions for discussion? The only thing I wanted to add is not anything specific to this trip, or it is actually, it is in February the 11th through the 15th. And I know that, I think it was back in February before COVID-19, we had approved the 10th and the 10th through the 12th graders to take a trip to Italy, I believe, around this same time. I'd have to go back and look at my notes, but I know that we approved for them to take a trip. So I think that, I don't
Dr.
remember.
Johnson,
Yes.
just to let you know, over trips outside of the country have been just eliminated at this point. So
Okay,
anything
that's what I was going to ask. Okay, that's why I said it was kind of related to this trip, but not. Okay.
Ireland was off the table. Greece is off the table. France is off the table.
Okay, all right, okay. That was where I was going with that. I was going like, okay, that was out of the country, but we had voted on that before all of that had occurred. Now,
yes.
Just a question about that. I know that you said the seniors from this trip, when we had canceled it or before, they were able to get their refund. What about the people who may or may not have started paying on that Italy Greece trip? Did they get their refund?
That is a good question. They're all refunded, Dr. Johnson.
Okay. All right, good. Good. It's good to know because I mean, sometimes school trips and they don't insure these trips. And if they're not insured, then they don't get the money back. That's just, they're out. Correct. As a matter of fact, I think CPS is fighting a couple, it was on the news that they were fighting a couple of situations like that.
They proposed that Carnegie Hall happen, but it was at a church. It wasn't Carnegie Hall. And we're like, that's not the same. No, you can't give me a substitute Carnegie Hall.
No,
it's impossible.
Carnegie Hall is Carnegie Hall. Yeah, you're right. Right. Okay. Well, I just wanted to add that. I wanted to ask about that trip because I knew we had voted on that back in February. So are there any other questions or concerns or statements that any other board members would like to make? Seeing none, Mr. Seymour, would you please call that vote?
Sure. Dr. Cupoletti?
Aye.
Mr. McGowan?
Aye.
Mrs. Douglas?
Aye.
Mr. Birdie,
Aye.
Dr. Johnson.
Aye. That vote passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is 9.03, which is the summer school offerings for 2020. Mr. Smith, you have the floor.
Dr. Ragland or Mrs. Martin, are you available to give any information about the summer school offerings? The board has heard these offerings before, but I wanted to know if you had any specific updates that you wanted to share with the board at this time.
Yes, Mr. Smith, for the elementary piece for 2nd through 6th, we are definitely still working on our literacy and our math. As mentioned earlier, we're using the Lexia program along with the ST Math program. Very excited about the opportunity for our 2nd graders. This is their first time to actually be a part of summer opportunity to learn. So we're definitely monitoring what's going on within the whole scope of the summer school experience, and we'll be able to report out additional information as it evolves and more of our 2nd through 6th grade students join in that session.
So yes, with 7 through 12, we are using various resources such as Freckle, Math Excel. We have quite a few students who have shown up at the middle school level. There's been contact with parents by both teachers as well as administration to keep the feedback loop going so that parents are fully aware of the progress that their child is making at the high school level. I understand that there are no issues, it's smooth sailing. We have some very supportive teachers at both levels, and they are looking to make sure that all of our students are learning and trying to fill in those gaps that they may have from the 4th quarter.
I think that's a very good point that Dr. Ragland and Mrs. Martin make. We have very supportive teachers that believe they realize that there's a gap. And some of these students may not even have been their own students in the fall, but they're actually covering the gap for their colleagues to make sure that young people have the opportunity to move through school expeditiously without a lot of stumbling blocks along the way. So thank you, Teaching and Learning Department. I appreciate it very much.
One question I do have, one of the printouts for the English as a second language didn't have a date. Is there any projected date at this time?
So that was a typo.
It's the same day.
Typo. The dates are the same.
Oh, okay, okay. So
We
it's the
do from
15th through the 9th, okay.
Yes.
Yes, what we do from time to time, Dr. Johnson, we leave something out just to see if you catch it. I mean, just to see how sharp you are. So that was just a thing. So make sure Dr. Ragland and also Dr. Martin, excuse me, make sure that we give her a gold star for catching that. All right, okay?
Come on.
Okay.
No, thank you.
You can't turn down.
Do you all really read this stuff? Is that what you're asking? Yeah, we do. I'm sure Dr. Cupoletti caught it, or Mr. Birdie, Mrs. Ruggles. Somebody caught it. Somebody else seen it. Mr.
I'll
McGowan.
tell you what, today is a good day. Give everybody a gold star, ladies. Okay.
Right, thank you.
So,
We
Dr.
deserve
Johnson, you get one. All right.
it. All right. All right. Is there anything else on that?
No.
Okay. We need a motion to approve the summer school offerings board. So if someone would make a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Go
Go
ahead,
ahead, Jeff.
Mr. McGowan. Nope, go ahead, Mr. McGowan.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the summer school offerings for 2020 as presented.
I'll second.
All right, very good. Thank you. It's been motioned and seconded. Since there are no questions, or are there any questions? I jumped the gun on that one, but Mr. Seymour, would you call that vote?
Sure. Dr. Cupoletti,
Aye.
Mr. McGowan's,
Aye.
Mrs. Ruggles,
Aye.
Mr. Birdie,
Aye.
Dr. Johnson.
Aye. That vote passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is 9.04, which is the school uniform policy for the 2020-2021 school year. Mr. Smith, you have the floor.
Yes, Madam President and Board, the recommendations to approve the school uniform policy for 2020-2021 is presented. There are no changes, and I am happy to say that no administrator contacted my office after March 15th saying that the kids were out of uniform. So it actually worked very, very well. I just want to let you know.
That's a great policy.
Yeah, you know it's working. Good. All right, Board, a motion would be in order.
I'll make a motion to approve the revised district calendar. Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry.
9.04.
Making a motion to approve the school uniform policy for 2020 through 2021 as presented.
I second.
Okay, it's been motioned and seconded. Are there any questions for discussion? All right, seeing none, Mr. Seymour, would you please call that vote?
Dr. Cupoletti,
Aye.
Mr. McGowan,
Aye.
Mrs. Ruggless,
Aye.
Mr. Birdie,
Aye.
Dr. Johnson.
Aye, that vote passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is 9.05, which is the revised district calendar for school year 2020-2021. Mr. Smith, you have the floor.
Yes, Madam President and Board, you had given my office the authority to have a professional development week, in August, the week of the 10th to the 14th. We're requesting to have an additional week for professional development, the 17th to the 21st. And the reason for that is because of the mental health issues that we are going to have to deal with professional development for our staff as well as for our students during the experience of COVID. We have to make sure that our teachers are properly trained with more technology, more support with the remote learning. We have to figure out, we have 4 different plans that we're going to actually bring to the board: a remote experience, a face-to-face experience, a flipped class experience, and a DI experience. So we needed additional time to train teachers to make sure that they got the full gamut. This does not impact our hours of school. We will not have to make up days or anything like that, but we wanted to make sure that there was enough professional development in that packet. The other thing is remember that in the event that we're actually able to participate in athletics, remember Woven Traditions was going to work with us, work with our staff and work with our parents and work with our administrators of how to deal with any controversial issues that may come our way by moving into the Eastern Cincinnati League. The league looks a little different than we do, so we wanted to make sure that we prepared our fans and our students to understand that diversity is a great thing. Diversity doesn't have to create controversy. So those are things on the table that we needed additional days in order to have a robust PD so that everybody could be on the same page.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. Board, a motion will be in order to for this item for the revised calendar.
I'll make a motion to approve the revised district calendar for school year 2020 to 2021 as presented.
I second.
Thank you. It's been motioned and seconded. Are there any questions for discussion?
Yes, Doc, one more piece. There is some report out from the CDC and governor's office that school may not start, even if it is starting, it may not start until the 21st of September. So I just want to bring that to the board's attention that that is something that's on the table being discussed.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other questions or discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Seymour, would you please call the vote?
Dr. Cupoletti,
Aye.
Mr. McGowan,
Aye.
Mrs. Ruggless,
Aye.
Mr. Birdie,
Aye.
Dr. Johnson.
Aye, that vote passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is 9.06, which is the revised district calendar for the school year 2021-2022. Mr. Smith, you have the floor.
As you know, Dr. Johnson, the school calendar is a year in advance. And so we wanted to make sure we had that same consideration of a 2-week window. That's the only revision that you would be looking at the beginning of the school year. We don't know where COVID's going to stand. So we wanted to make sure we had it in case we need it. In the event that we don't, we can go back and remodify it and do something different.
I'm looking at the calendar 2021, 2022.
Yes,
It
sir.
has professional development in the week of the 9th through 13th.
Yes, sir. It would be actually the 9th through 20th, Dr. Cupoletti. So it would be actually 2 weeks. So that's how we would want it.
So you'll make a change, is that right?
Yes, sir. We will make the change.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cupoletti. Yeah,
The
it's only
days
on there for 1 week.
Yeah, the days are counted right, but the PD is wrong.
Right.
So we'll make that revision and make sure we have it
Can
ready.
we go ahead and get a motion on the floor?
Sorry.
That's okay.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the district calendar for school year 2021, 2022 as presented.
Thank you.
Second.
I'll second.
Thank you. All right. It's been motion and second. Any other questions? We have the one that Dr. Cupoletti pointed out with the August second training week is not identified. They're going to make that change. Anything else that anybody's seen? Seeing none, Mr. Seymour, would you please call that vote?
Dr. Cupoletti,
Aye.
Mr. McGowan,
Aye.
Mrs. Ruggless,
Aye.
Mr. Birdie,
Aye.
Dr. Johnson.
Aye. That vote passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is 9.07, which is the second read. We had these policies last month. There's a second read of the new and revised policies. Mr. Smith, you have the floor.
Yes, Dr. Johnson and board, the recommendations to approve the second read, new and revised policies. The first policy, 4124, classified staff employment contract. This is a revision, employment of administrators, 1520. These are all revisions after this. It is revision, gifted education and identification, policy 2464, policy 3120, revised policy, employment of professional staff, revised policy, classified staff, employment of classified staff, revised policy 4162, classified staff, drug and alcohol testing of CDL license holders and other employees who perform safety sensitive functions. And finally, policy 6107, which is the revised policy and finances, authorization to accept and distribute electronic records and to use electronic signatures.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Board, a motion would be in order to approve these policies.
I'll make a motion to approve the second read, new and revised policies as presented.
I'll second.
It's been motion and second. Are there any questions or discussion?
I did have one question or comment. I think we talked about this the last time we went through the drug and alcohol testing of CDL license policy. Is this something that's annually given to the employees so that they understand what the rules are and what's going to happen if there's an issue?
Mr. Birdie, I know Ms. Wilson is still on the line, but yes, this is a document that they have to sign off on and agree. And if they decide not to take the screening, then that is a possible termination, more than likely. So they agree to it, they sign off on it, and they understand that this could be random at any time.
And that's what I thought we talked about last time. So just wanted to make sure.
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you, Mr. Birdie. Are there any other observations at this point? Seeing none, Mr. Seymour, would you please call that vote?
Dr. Cupoletti,
Aye.
Mr. McGowan,
Aye.
Mrs. Douglas,
Aye.
Mr. Birdie,
Aye.
Dr. Johnson.
Aye. That vote passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is 10.01, which is the Board of Education reports and the legislative report. I forwarded to you the legislative report to the board in your emails for the month of June. It's about, I printed it, 20 some pages long. Let's say 21 pages long. But I did read it, and for the most part, what it is consumed by is conversations around COVID-19, the transition of students back to school, what that's going to look like, trying to figure out, you know, childcare in event that, you know, there's some sort of alternative school with so many days live, so many days. So that's basically what the legislative report, I mean, it's on everybody's mind, and we don't have a whole lot of time to figure it out. It did talk about the concerns of different school districts. When you read through it, there were some school districts that were concerned of the averages and the numbers of minority cases that were being diagnosed with the coronavirus. And, you know, there were other, maybe more rural where there's a little more spread out, but it wasn't the case. That was a topic of about 2.5 pages of discussion here. So when you get a chance, take a chance to look at it. It's important information that we also need to be up to date on, because our administrators, superintendent, treasurer, they'll be making some of these same types of decisions for our students as well. So moving on then to 10.02, Mr. Birdie, I do believe you sent us something, but if you want to add some comment to what you had sent us.
I did send everybody a packet and a PDF file with some documents in it, as well as a Word document that had some a summary of what's in there. I thought probably hadn't done this in a while, if ever, is to give everybody a roster of the current board of directors for Great Oaks, so you know who all is on there, and there's 35 of us. Going back to the meetings issue and deciding when to have meetings in person. Maybe Great Oaks jumped the gun. I'm not sure I would say that, but we did have a meeting on June 10th where the board members were given the option of showing up in person or joining by Zoom. And I will say that there were over 20 of us that showed up in person for that meeting. So, and they maintained this social distance, and everybody had a mask and a face cover. So they were looking at that. One of the highlights of the meeting, I think, was just in this day and age and what we're going through as a society, is the formation of an equity committee that the Great Oaks board wants to put together. So they're working on that. I've got a statement on equity that the Great Oaks put out. Also in there is a weekly update from Harry Snyder, and they're still going through the same thing everybody else is. What's the new school year going to look like? And then a spotlight on students. We had a Wintonwood student, Shelley Biddy, who attended Scarlet Oaks as an engineering technologies and robotics program, was recognized as the class of 2020 speaker at the Scarlet Senior Virtual Ceremony. So, and then she also received the Mary Helen Steinhauer Memorial Scholarship. And then there's an ACT report and a legislative update related to the career tech. So that's all in there.
Thank you, Mr. Birdie. The next item on the agenda is 11.01, which is board motions and recommendations. And at this point, I'm not aware of any board motions or recommendations that we need to discuss at this time. I will open it up to the board. Do you all have anything that you need to discuss at this time as a group? Yes, go ahead, Mr. McGinn.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't know about what discussion. Just want to thank, both Mr. Smith and Mr. Seymour and the teachers and the administrators. I know this is a crazy time, and I know you can tell by the length of this call that there's a lot of things going on trying to handle and adapt to the new normal. So I really appreciate it and just proud to be a part of what you guys are doing.
Thank you, Mr. McGowan. That moves us to our next item, which is board comments from the Board of Education Superintendent and Treasurer. Mr. Birdie, do you have anything that you'd like to share?
Just the appreciation for everybody, administrators, teachers, staff, everybody involved in trying to move the students forward in their educational process, as well as just encouraging everybody stay in touch with each other and people that might need help, and stay safe and healthy.
Thank you, Mr. Birdie. Mr. McGowan, do you want to add anything to what you've already said?
I didn't realize I jumped the gun, so I'm surprised that Miss Ruggles didn't jump on me or tease me about that. But yes, that was my comments. Thank you.
All right, no problem. Thank you so much. Dr. Cupoletti, you have any comments at this time?
I just hope everyone stays positive in these tough times, and thank you for all you do, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Cupoletti. Mrs. Ruggles?
Ooh, I have a whole lot to say, but I'm gonna hold on to it. There's just so much that's going on, and I'm just confident that in our leadership that we're thinking about how do we position the district for success and make sure that our students are emotionally healthy, in the next coming year. It's been a lot. It's been a lot of emotional things that's going on with the racial pandemic. And I'm looking forward to seeing how we step up to support change and to support our students as they try to make sense of everything that's going on, with, having to go online. What does it look like for the next year? And how do they make sense of the world around them? So we have a lot of work ahead of us.
Yes, we do. Thank you, Mrs. Ruggles. Mr. Seymour, would you like to have comments at this time?
No, but thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Smith?
No, thank you.
All right, thank you. The only thing I want to add to what Mrs. Ruggles is saying and the other board members, we do thank and appreciate our administrators, because you've had to spin around on a dime and make this whole thing happen. And I think that we did pretty good. I think you guys did pretty good. And we appreciate that many times effective leadership is not always easy to make the right decision. It's not always the popular decision, but we appreciate the decisions that you all have made. And to Mrs. Ruggles' point with respect to just maintaining, understanding what might occur as we move back into the classroom with what's gone on with the coronavirus, then the protest and everything, that I appreciate that our superintendent has a background in mental health counseling. I appreciate that he understands that, and when he began to hire our counselors, that he had that in mind. So we have some people already on board that are somewhat prepared to handle, some of those situations. Not to say that, we might not have to call for some outside help or whatever, but he's got the people in place that know how to start the process. And sometimes that's the hardest part, knowing where to start the process. So we do appreciate the team that we have together. And also, I just want to say a thank you to this board, that I appreciate the work that you do and the input that you have, that you give, and everything is always open for discussion. As long as I'm the board president, we'll always be able to discuss everything and come to a consensus on what is best for the district, what is best for the students within the district. So we just really appreciate all of you and your input that you have.
Dr. Johnson, let me just add that this is such a great opportunity for us to build upon what we've already started, instilling in our students and really what the environment of the Winton Woods City School District represents. And that is the trust, respect, and responsibility.
Right.
And we're at a time where I've never seen us at a time light this as it relates to the possibility and the opportunity for change. I think, you know, we've had elephants in the room and we talk around the elephant and under it, but we never go straight at and talking about the elephant that's in the room as it relates to racism and how it is that we treat each other. And I thank you, Dr. Johnson, for your willingness and leadership to say, you know, it's time to, you know, deal with issues head on.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that our district was a little different in that we had already began to create agency for our students, and
Yes.
that to step up and speak up for yourself, and that whole process of the project-based learning and the problem-based learning, it forced them to interact already. So we might be a little bit ahead of the game. We'll have to see how it plays out. We'll have to see how it plays out, but we do have a pretty good team right now, and we appreciate all of you for what you do. So having said that, board, we will not go into an additional executive session, which if you look at the agenda, that's where the executive session is set up to be. But I would like to thank again the Waycross community for their service in taping tonight's regular meeting. And with that said, then I would like to call the meeting of the Winton City School Board of Education regular meeting for Monday, June the 22nd, 2020 adjourned. We again thank you. We want you to take care of yourself and your loved ones. Stay safe, healthy, and well. And I learned something today that everybody that lives in that zip code should go get tested. So I'm going to be encouraging myself and my family to go and do just that. But with that said, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much.